Apocalypse, as in the X-Men film that underperformed this summer, may have been the end to the X-Men films as we know them. Is a reset on the way? Stick around, bub. It's Screen Junkies News. Some uncanny news out of Fox. Embedded sources for The Hollywood Reporter are claiming that the studio is taking big steps to shake up their X-Men franchise, so far just short of teaming up with Marvel Studios. After a series of setbacks, including the previously mentioned X-Men Apocalypse, Deadpool 2 being stalled after its director left, Gambit never materializing, the main cast being at the end of their 3-year contract, and the upcoming bow for Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, Fox clearly wants to shake the Etch-a-Sketch and try something new. Reports are claiming that Bryan Singer is out and Simon Kinberg, overseer of the franchise as producer and writer, is ostensibly in, at least for the new script. Also coming our way is The New Mutants, a spin-off featuring superpowered teens directed by Fault in Our Stars director Josh Boone. But before that kicks off, the words being thrown around behind the scenes are reset and reconfigured. So this could mean a whole new take, let alone timeline, for the new running franchise. To help me make sense of this, I've got a great panel with me. Dan Murrell, Mark Andreyko, Ross Cornett, and over there, Charlie Feldman. Hey guys.
Hi.
So let's get into X-Men. Dan, I'll start with you. Do you think this is a good idea? I feel like they have reset or rebooted X-Men so many times.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of resetting the universe is something that's always interesting to explore. I think that, I don't know, here's the thing, I'm looking, because we have right in front of me, I've got the grossest for all the X-Men movies. Mm-hmm. The highest, if you take Deadpool out of it, because I don't count Deadpool as an X-Men movie.
Yeah.
Take Deadpool out of it,
I mean,
only 2 of them have cracked 200 million. The average for these movies is 200 million. It's in the blockbuster era, the X-Men is as close to a niche superhero franchise as you can get. My problem is they already made the big sell on the reboot reset with Days of Future Past. That was merging the timelines. They just introduced their new cast with Apocalypse. So I feel like
it's confusing
they
already.
just did reset everything, and now they're talking about doing it again. I don't know. This has always been a messy franchise, and this seems like it might muddle things up even further.
Mark, they're saying that Logan could be the end of this first cycle. What do we call it? Like phase? I don't even know. I can't follow it at this stage.
Phase number 1.
Do you think that's likely, that they're going to end with Logan and then start afresh after that?
Well, I think they can say whatever they want. I think that, this is obviously going to be Hugh Jackman's last hurrah as Wolverine. It's been 17 years that he's been playing this part.
Amazing.
And I can't imagine that at his age, we're of a similar age, I can't imagine working out as hard as he does every movie and being in your late 40s. His body's going to start failing. He doesn't actually have a healing factor or a metal skeleton. I think they need to commit. I think they need to either commit to doing a full reboot or continue on and just justify different timelines, because it's been such a soft, messy reboot with X-Men First Class, and then the time jump to the 80s when the characters didn't age, and there's so many like dangling. It's actually much like the X-Men comic books in the 80s when Chris Claremont was writing them. Lots of plot threads that are just kind of forgotten and are kind of dangling out there. So hopefully they'll do a full reboot, and or just. I want us to get to a point with these superhero movies that they're like James Bond. We just recast the roles and we don't worry about the continuity and make these standalone stories with these characters with a shared history. I think we have to, because pinning too much money on and too many hopes on a specific actor like a Robert Downey Jr., they're eventually going to price themselves out. And then you're stuck and you back yourselves into a corner. We just need to do, this is a new Wolverine. We're not commenting on it. It's just who it is.
Yeah, that's right, because Ross, you've got Jennifer Lawrence, Michael Fassbender, James McAvoy and Nicholas Hoult are all at the end of their 3-year contract. Can they still go forward with X-Men without those actors?
It's really interesting, because I think I made verbal expressions a couple of times, which was one, I think you're right, Dan, that Deadpool in a sense stands on its own because it is so tonally dissonant than the rest of the X-Men universe, but it's also the most successful thing they have going on, so it's got to be a really confusing time at Fox. And then I feel like phase-wise, this would be phase 2, but it's almost, they never really disconnected from the first phase, so it's like phase 1.5, 7, 9. It's going in such odd decimal moves, and I think they were hoping to introduce, with this last film, Apocalypse, this young cast that could sort of bring them forward for the next 10 years. And because that didn't really work, I wonder if they're really going to fall back on sort of more standalone films? Do they just do X-23 and they do New Mutants, which wouldn't be a standalone film, but do they start to explore doing other characters and not worry as much about the central X-Men characters like Magneto and Professor X? I don't know.
XCU, whatever we call it. I don't know. Dan, what would you like to see from Deadpool 2? Would you like it to be more connected to the whole X-Men universe or stay its own weird thing?
I like it as its own weird thing. I think some of the funniest parts of the Deadpool movie, the first one, were the fact that it was almost a commentary on the X-Men franchise and not a part of it. I think if you start weaving the storyline in with the X-Men and then it becomes just another part of another connected universe, you lose some of what's special about it. Deadpool, the comic book character, and Deadpool, the movie character, has always been the kind of guy that pops up from the bottom of the frame of the comic book panel and goes, "Hello, how's it going? You're reading a comic." And now I think Deadpool should be its own thing. If you want to cross characters over, like Mark said, continuity, I mean, so many series are just drowning in continuity at this point. This is the premier case of drowning in continuity. I would love to see him just be his own separate thing. He can do what he wants. You can bring characters over, but I don't want to see a storyline cross.
Well, I remember that Deadpool with the no mouth, and next to him was Gambit.
Yeah.
Mark, do you think we'll ever see a Gambit film? It's been stalled so many times.
Does anybody want a Gambit film?
Yeah,
does
I
anybody
don't know.
want Channing Tatum running around going, ha ha ha, bonjour,
I
and
think
throwing
Marshall
cards?
and Donna really does.
But do they want a Gambit film because they think they have a good story, or do they want a Gambit film because there's a Gambit character? And are we going to make every characters? There are so many other characters in the X-Men universe that are so much more interesting and so richer.
Yeah.
And going to the Deadpool thing, my concern with the Deadpool sequel is comedies that strike a zeitgeist button like Deadpool usually don't continue on. That's lightning in a bottle. Remember, Wayne's World was huge.
Wayne's World 2.
The Hangover. Hangover 2 and 3. Ugh. It's potentially a risk with Guardians of the Galaxy. I hope I'm wrong. I want these films to be great. But with the comedic stuff is so time sensitive and so time specific that can you capture that again? And what was so fresh, why people went to see Deadpool was because it felt fresh. Will it feel fresh? And you can and I'm really worried that they're overthinking it now. Now you lost Junkie XL on the score. You lost the director. You know, I think Ryan Reynolds owned that part, but when you start giving actors control over all that behind-the-scenes stuff, it can go off the rails in a myriad number of ways. So I hope for the best, but the past show gives us enough warning signs that we should be really concerned and not take any of this lightly.
I miss the days of the standalone movie. You know, cinematic universes can work in Marvel's case, or they can be problematic, as we've seen a little bit with DC so far. Hopefully that'll come together. And then with X-Men, it just seems all over the place. Roth, can you explain to me New Mutants? Because to me that sounds like X-Men First Class, having no knowledge of the comic book.
I don't know that it necessarily will be X-Men. They're younger.
X-Men?
They're
Okay.
teenagers. So I don't think that it will feel like, well, actually, they were
That's what we just got in X-Men Apocalypse. Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, X-Men Apocalypse.
There's no foresight to anything in this franchise. It's all
Well,
just...
they're very different characters.
Yeah. I mean, with Josh Boone as well, it sounds like they're
Yes.
appealing to the teenage market specifically.
Yeah, and I think that that's what they want. They keep trying to figure out, this is what I sense, that they keep trying to figure out how do we bring in really young actors so that we can get a new generation galvanized around this franchise.
Or we can sign them all to 7 movies because they're not expensive.
Because they're not expensive.
Indentured servitude. Yeah.
Exactly, both of those things. And, they're going after Game of Thrones pretty heavily because Maisie Williams was rumored to be in New Mutants, which I think would be rad. But I agree with you. Like, I feel like if Deadpool was successful, it's because it felt fresh and it was a new character and it served that character very well. So why not find some individual characters, not necessarily Gambit, but kind of explore their stories and not worry so much maybe about bringing it all together, which is, I know everybody feels like they need to worry about that.
It's so hard though, especially when you have so many different timelines going on. Do you guys have a character from this universe that you would love to see on the screen? Do you know of one? X-23. Tell me about X-23.
So X-23 is basically and it's interesting because a lot of people will probably say like, oh, we've already had Wolverine because she's basically like the Lady Wolverine.
Gotcha.
But I do think that it could be an interesting take, especially since Wolverine has been so central to this franchise. And like we've been saying, Hugh Jackman's going to leave. This would be a way to introduce a new version of that character, younger, probably cheaper, get a few movies. I think it'd be cool.
Well, and girls are the most reliable geek audience now.
Yeah.
Teenage boys, chasing teenage boys to get them to come to movies is a fool's errand. They'll watch it on their phone and they'll play the video game, but it's next to impossible to get teenage boys to go to movies anymore. The paradigm shift has been so solid for so long, and the studios are behind on that. They need to realize that the audiences that are loyal and are going to see these movies in theaters aren't the same demographics. It's the same problem that the TV networks have right now. They're still working from paradigms from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The world has changed, and they haven't. They need to catch up, especially if these movies are going to be costing $250 and $300 million.
Yeah.
We are 3 big failures away from a seismic shift in what because these 3 of these movies can bankrupt the studio.
Yeah, I know, that's scary. And speaking of like the world changing, we were speaking off camera about how these comic books, back in the day were quite political. Do you think you will ever see superhero films that actually comment on the world? Because I feel like X-Men is ripe for that.
I don't think so. Not unless we get to a place where corporations don't own them. As long as big corporations own them and these are responsible for stock options and dividends and that sort of thing, they're going to be safe. They might dance around it, but you can only be political and be specific and have a voice of dissonance when you're not responsible for the jobs of tens of thousands of people worldwide.
That's true. And you've got to appeal to foreign markets now. And
I think they can do it in the way that really great science fiction does it, which is that you remove the direct correlation, right? And then you do kind of an allegory, right? Like if you look at Battlestar,
Sure.
It was certainly referencing things that were happening in the real world pretty overtly, but because it was set in this heightened sci-fi world, they were able to do that. And I feel like you see that a little bit with Civil War, a little bit with Winter Soldier. They can go only so far, to your point, because there's a lot of money.
But the difference is, too, that those are Battlestar Galactica and Star Wars and Dune and Star Trek are futuristic. They're removed, and yes, you can get more specific to direct events, but in franchises that take place in the current day, it's really, really difficult to do that.
right.
You could do, though, I could see, like, just for example, the character of Mojo, who is an X-Men villain. He is this crazy, wacky, over-the-top kind of like insane character who takes the universe and turns it into his own twisted reality show.
Yeah.
Again, just for example, if you do some kind of an allegory or something,
like
you can do a spin-off. Again, like you can go crazy out there with sci-fi and stuff and try to do allegorical stuff. Even if it's set in the real world, the comic book universe is endless. And I think that, it's really about the creativity. The reason that Battlestar worked so well, I think, is that, yes, it was political. I would say it was a political show, but because it was Cylons and it was space and there was the fleet and there was you didn't read it as that, even though it was. You don't necessarily have to be on the nose. You can use the trappings and do commentary in a way that's not necessarily going to turn people off.
Or maybe we need some brevity and some light, and Deadpool will bring us that. Do you want the X-Men universe as a whole to go more in the state, like more towards that Deadpool self-referential humor?
I mean, I think.
Do you think it would work with the X-Men New Mutants?
I want stories that are well told and are honest to what they should be.
That's what I was going to say.
I think Deadpool is Deadpool, X-Men is X-Men, Spider-Man is Spider-Man. Trying to make them shoehorn them into being the Wolverine version of Deadpool.
I feel like
is
they
also
go
a
where the
fool's
money
errand.
is, and they're like, Deadpool's so successful, let's make more of that.
I mean,
Hopefully not.
I mean, I think that. Yeah, what do you guys think about New Mutants? Do you think there's a way to attack that and that feels really fresh and new?
It's X-Men. I mean, it's X-Men First Class, and it's it's Teenage Mutants. And
there's a couple of ways they could do it. If they reboot the franchise, they could absolutely do that. They could absolutely do that, and they could do something. I mean, and here you can have this for free, Fox, if you want it. They could do something with the New Mutants with Professor X, where the X-Men are gone. And Professor X, we don't know where they are, and he gathers New Mutants, which is kind of an homage to the original Giant Size X-Men 1, where the original team had disappeared. You could do that, but to have a reboot when you have this New Mutants movie that is seemingly shares DNA with the current franchise, it seems very difficult and seems very confusing. And also, too, Josh Boone has a lot on his plate. He's also developing the Interview with the Vampire franchise for Universal. He's doing this. He's signed for a bunch of things. And it's going to be which one is ready. And the last thing you want with one of these superhero movies or these big budget movies is we have a release date and we reverse engineer the movie to fit the release date. We have seen that fail time and time again. But there's the ticking clock Fox has with their deal with Marvel. They have to make these movies. So that also we don't have the luxury of saying, we're going to take a couple of years off.
And because if they don't make another film, won't they lose the rights?
They will.
Yeah.
I had a friend that pitched this idea of, I'll just say really quickly, of titling Deadpool to Deadpool kills the Fantastic Four and have him kill them in the first like 30 seconds and just never reference it again, and then they've gotten away with it and they can keep the Fantastic Four for a while.
It's so funny because Deadpool actually appeared in the New Mutants comic. So could the New Mutants start the whole franchise again and then from there go off into their own spin-off movies potentially?
They could.
Potentially, they haven't had much success with any of the New Mutants spinning off into their own books on their own. I don't think any of them have ever had a solo book.
So they're all together.
Magic had a miniseries, but that was before she was an actual member of the New Mutants. So we'll see. Who knows? You know, for all the confusion and the potential difficulties with this franchise, who would have ever thought that the world would embrace Groot?
Yeah.
It's true.
You know, who would have thought
And
Deadpool?
Rocket.
Who would have thought Deadpool would make $780 million? So everything is right until it's not. And what William Goldman said, nobody knows anything about anything. So we're just all
we're all
shooting
just
in the dark here.
speculating. Yeah.
And to your earlier point, just to like wrap that up as an idea, I think is that what those two things have in common is that they were true to those characters. They told the story that they needed to tell, right? They were legitimately invested, and there was great passion behind both of those films. I'm talking about Guardians and Deadpool.
Yep.
And they served the characters. And I think if you do that in any movie, whatever the genre, it's going to be a great movie, right?
Yeah, they let them do their own thing. I felt like the directors got a say on how that was, or maybe Ryan Reynolds did. Who knows? Before we wrap it up, let's check in with Charlie and see what are people saying on social media.
So I'd say overwhelmingly, most people want to see a way for Fox to bridge the divide between them and Marvel and figure out a way to make that work. Mm-hmm. Even though some people are saying that that's a lot of characters to deal with. How do you possibly make that work? Even though #multiverse could be a way. But yeah, I think that most people would be excited to see Marvel make some sort of deal that they did with Sony.
Yeah.
We're actually, I think we may be doing another video about that this week. I don't know.
Maybe.
Spoiler alert.
Maybe. Well, certainly interesting times ahead for us all. Dan Murrell, Mark Andreyko, Roth Cornett, Charlie Feldman, thank you so much for joining us. And if you want to continue the conversation, you can use the hashtag #SJNews. I'm Alicia Malone. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to click over here for some more cool stuff and subscribe to us. Leave us a comment and a thumbs up. I'll see you soon.